Greg and I were talking one day this week. We were talking about how, we kid with each other and other people don't know we're kidding, but we do. So I want to make sure everybody understands. Chris makes a great steak. I was kidding a while ago when I said it's a bad steak. I'm one of those medium rare guys, and he gets it. He's got it. So, if you need the lessons, we'll go see Chris. Okay, let's talk about motivation and evangelism. What pushes us? We've talked about how to do it, what we should do, how we should approach people, what we should tell people, our responsibilities and all that, but the key to persistence is being motivated. Motivation pushes us to do what we do in a lot of things, right? And so it keeps evangelism going. What's the problem with evangelism a lot of times? We get on fire, we get hot, we get ready, we get excited, and we do some things, and then we sort of slow down, and then we slower and slower and slower, and then it's a second thought again. So how do we become persistent at it? What keeps it going? Remember, our goal is to save souls. Our goal is to do what God has commanded to us, to be obedient to Him. And we shouldn't be looking at it as church growth. We should be looking at it as saved souls. Church growth is a byproduct. The main focus is to save souls, right? And if we do that, then the church is naturally going to grow. So look, motivation. Dennis Waitley said, motivation is like steam, properly channeled. It can move large objects like a steam-powered train. But without it, the train is motionless. So let me ask you this question for your notebooks, if you still have them. What discourages you most about evangelism? Give that some thought. What discourages you? You personally, individually.
Getting turned down.
Rejection.
And you say they don't show.
Yep. There's a lot of things. Okay. So let's look at this. What is motivation? Well, it's an inner drive. It's an idea captured in the imagination which can be harnessed into an intense drive toward a goal. Men and women who are motivated push themselves. Self-motivation. They push themselves forward, plow through their inevitable setbacks, heading ever onward to their dreams. Self-motivation is a skill. It's something we develop. It's an attitude we have. Leaders may help us channel it, and leaders may help us use it and keep us focused on it. And the better equipped we are to do something, the more motivated we are to do it. How come I haven't hit a golf ball in 10 years?
I haven't asked you to go.
You don't want to go with me.
You're not motivated to do it.
I'm not motivated to do it because I have no skill at it. If I was a good player, I'd probably be out there every day, right? The better equipped we are to do something, the more motivated we are to do it. So if we train ourselves, if we get trained, if we work at it, if we develop skills to be evangelists, to work at evangelism, then we're more motivated to actually do it. You've heard the old saying, success breeds success. Once we have success, we say, oh, where's the next one? I'm ready for the next one. So we appreciate the joy of being a Christian. So motivation is actually the steam that drives the train. So, that which moved Jesus ought to move us. We follow in His footsteps. So what moved Jesus? Well, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. As we follow in His steps, He was concerned with mankind. He had compassion for mankind. He endured the cross for us. And so that should motivate us because of what he's done for us. What motivated Jesus was saving souls. I've come to seek and save the lost. He was motivated by the joy that was set before him. He cared about people's need for salvation. He was moved when he saw the lost. Remember he said, when he talked about Jerusalem, I'd gather you up like chicks. All of those kinds of things. He prayed for the lost. He prayed for laborers to go to harvest in Matthew 9. He sent out his apostles to deliver the message. The joy that was set before him. Compassion for lost souls. God, not willing that any of us should perish. He had a sense of purpose. He knew his job, knew why he was here. And he knew, as Paul talked about, the alternative. And so that motivated him to teach, to preach, to heal, to die for us. And he knew the love of his Father. Well, we know the love of our Father as well. So, since he cared about people, then we are too. The same thing should motivate us to save the lost. We're following our Master. We're his disciples. So, why we need to be the Lord's workers? Well, first of all, we're commanded to. It's a fulfillment of that command. We're to show our love for others, and it's to follow the example of the New Testament church. We looked at all those different passages in the book of Acts earlier, where they were out teaching and preaching, and the numbers that were added. That's our example. Why would we not follow that? That's our motivation, to be like them. We always say, we follow the New Testament pattern. That's what we follow in our worship. That's what we follow in our doctrine. Why would we follow that in evangelism? That's the example. And we know the terror of the Lord that we've talked about. And we should get joy out of saving others. When you're instrumental, when you're part of the process, when you help in bringing someone to Christ, and you know that someone is lost, is now saved, doesn't that give you an indescribable joy to know that? So these kinds of things should motivate us to save the lost, fulfill our purpose. We delight in what God has done for us. If we love our neighbor, what's the passage tell us to do with our neighbor? Huh? Love the neighbor as we love ourselves. So if we love that neighbor, are we going to let that neighbor perish? No. Are we going to let that neighbor, be eternally punished without even telling them the good news of Christ? We're not going to share in that. See, we can prevent lost souls, can we not? We have the prevention. So when we think about our desire to save souls, plus our commitment to save souls, that's our motivation. Our desire and our commitment. We have the truth, and passion for that truth is going to compel us to say, hey, I know the truth already, let me tell you about it. Come and listen. So we ought to know the difference between I want to do something and I ought to do something. I want to save souls is a good motivation, but I ought to save souls is what we have to do. For if I preach the gospel, that gives me no ground for boasting, for necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. What's Paul talking about? He's saying this is necessary. It's what I've been commanded to do. And even when I do it, It's not something I brag about, but woe to me if I don't preach the gospel. We can prevent people from being lost. And when we think about that, how do we get started? Congregationally and individually. Well, I talked a lot about planning, so I'm going to encourage you sometime this week, sit down, just you, piece of paper, your notebook you got here today, take that notebook and start writing down a plan for yourself. Focus on what you can do. And commit to it. And begin with first impressions. We talked about, you don't get a second chance for a first impression. Think about how you're going to approach people. Think about what you want them to see and hear from you. Develop that list of prospects. Write down people's names. Don't just put, I want to have 5 prospects. Put down 5 people, their names. And what should you commit to? Well, how about you commit that you follow the leaders of this congregation? That you help them, that you do what they're willing to, what they're asking you to do. That you commit to continuing your learning and your training in evangelism. There's more to it than what we've presented here in 6 hours. So you can sit down and say, I'm willing to continue this. I'm willing to pay the cost. I'm willing to do what's necessary. I'm willing to accept different types of people. I'm willing to accept new people. I'm willing to accept people who aren't like me. I'm willing to accept people who don't think like me, look like me, those kinds of things. I'm willing to develop a new circle of friends that I can talk to. Those are the things you commit to yourself. Make yourself a promise. So when we talk about getting started, here's some ideas. Force yourself to get to know people you don't know. Now sometimes that's hard for people. But, force yourself on people. You say, that's not good. Yes, it is. Force yourself on people sometimes. People you don't know. Use the social media to tell the gospel. We're really good on getting on Facebook and telling people where we've been, what we saw, what we had for dinner last night.
A picture of our food.
A picture of our food, all that kind of stuff. If you can use Facebook and Twitter and I don't know, whatever they are, Instagram, if you can use them for that kind of stuff, can't you use it to tell the gospel?
If you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, let them know what's going on. Read a book, do some research on evangelism. That sheet I gave you, some of the ones I use, and there's more, but I recommend those highly. You can get online. There's several really good websites on personal evangelism. From the Church of Christ, you got to watch who you connect up with, but if you do the research, you find it. Sort of get an outline in your head about what you're going to talk about to somebody. Make a personal script. I don't mean Jesus died for, not that kind of script, but that you have it in your head. When you're out, leave a tract somewhere. I know people that, they keep them with them. They give the waitress a tip, but they also leave her a tract. Then I know people that says, I'll just leave her a tract and keep my money. Don't do that. Leave her the tip too. Develop an association with someone within the congregation that you can work together with. A teammate. I talked about mailing a book earlier. Be able to learn the words that you can use when you're connecting it to the gospel. Teach a class. Gather the resources up that you need and become a risk taker. What's a risk taker? What's the risk involved here? We've talked about it. What is it?
Rejection.
Rejection is the only thing. What's the worst somebody can do?
Slam the door in your face?
Yep, tell you no. That's the worst. They're not going to kill you. They're not going to harm you. You know, they're just going to tell you no. So, be a risk taker.
And then what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, you got to make a decision. I'm either going to get another no and another no, or I'm going to give up. Pick a skill and dive deep. And what I'm talking about there is, you know, maybe you say, I'm not very good at explaining things. I'm not very good at listening. I'm not very good at whatever it is you're not very good at. Pick that and say, I'm going to improve it. Look at it. Figure it out. You know, I'm not very good at talking in front of people. Well, fake it. But do it. See? Dive deep means you're really going to get involved in trying to be better. So when we talk about this congregational plan or an individual plan, it's not saying, well, we're going to have an event, we're going to have a 3-day seminar on evangelism. I mean, that might be part of it, but you know, it's not an event. It's all the who, what, when, wheres, and hows that's going to have to be done. And we talked about determining our basic goal and purpose and the objectives. And I asked this question, what does done look like? Now, when I'm, you know, I do try to cook at home. Roxanne lets me in the kitchen sometimes. And how do I know when the cake's done? The smoke alarm goes off, right? Well, how do we know when it's done when it comes to evangelism? Does some alarm go off and say you're through, you finished, you got it?
They're wet.
Huh?
They're wet.
They're wet. Now, here's the thing. It's never done.
Oh.
We never complete it. It's a continual process. So what, again, should be all in our plan? Well, let's make sure our plan includes biblical preaching and teaching. That we start there. Our plan includes fervent prayer for God to help us. That we have a mindset, and I hope this whole thing is about our mindset. That we get a mindset for the lost. Those new folks who have never heard or who have never committed to Christ, who've never obeyed Him. We have that mission mindset. It's part of our plan. That we do a self-assessment, and maybe we even ask for some help in that assessment. You know, we sort of take an outsider approach. If I look at Larry when it comes to evangelism, what am I going to see? And then Larry has to answer that question. What am I doing? What can I do? Part of our plan should include that we have some very high expectations of ourselves, of our congregation, of what we're going to do. It does, you know, I was telling you that I managed that sales group one time in my career. Well, I had one really great advantage. Since I was also the chief of operations, I was also executive vice president of the company, I had one really great advantage. I could set my own goals. So I set the easy goals. And then I would hit them. And then I would pat myself on the back and say, Larry, you did great. But then I said, no, that's not right. So we had to start to stretch. So we need to set some goals that stretch us. You know, how hard is it to, if we say, well, we're going to expose the gospel to 5 people next week. Well, out of 75 people, that might not be hard. But what if we say next week we're going to expose 50 people? See, we need to stretch ourselves. Another part of our plan, that we should have strong, as a congregation, we should have strong Bible classes for all ages. Families that come to worship for the first time, Bible classes are very important. They want to know that their kids are getting something out of it too. So I'm talking about the quality of the Bible class. You know, for all ages. It needs to be part of our plan. So when we start looking at all of this, you know, Bible preaching, Bible teaching, prayer, outward focus, formal training programs, self-assessment of ourselves, high expectations, strong worship, strong Bible classes, all of those things, we could add a lot more to the list. How do we get that done? Anybody know how to eat an elephant?
One piece at a time.
One bite at a time, that's right. So you got to start somewhere, little steps maybe, baby steps, but you got to make it priorities. You got to say, this is what we're going to do, and then do it. If you never say you're going to do it, it's not going to get done. If you take no action, if there's no activity, if you just listen to what we've said the last few hours, you know, I could come back next year and we'd be in the same situation. All right. If we do nothing, we get nothing. So we have to make these our priorities. So we need to get started. You have to sow before you can reap. That's a process. We all understand. It involves that preparation and planning. You know, we have to, the sower knows the seed in the ground. We have to prepare hearts for the gospel. We have to teach the gospel. So evangelism is both sowing and reaping. I heard one guy put it this way. He said, you got to bring them in, uplift them, and then follow them. And that includes study with them. So first we got to get them here, then we got to make them, maybe not make, but we've got to have them where they benefit from being here. They're uplifted spiritually from being with us. And then we follow up, hopefully with a Bible study or something else. People need to see what faithfulness looks like. A lot of folks out there have the slightest clue, don't have the slightest clue about what a church looks like, about what goes inside a church. They've never been here before. They don't know. And the simplest way for that to happen is to invite them to observe your life, observe you as a disciple, and observe your service up close. To observe the worship of a congregation up close. All of those things. They've got to understand what faithfulness looks like. So they have to see it in us. Identify people you can influence. I keep telling you about making a list. That friendship circle, that friendship evangelism. Think about people that you have influence over. People on the job, you know, your co-workers, your friends, your neighbors, your family. Look for opportunities to create new friends. Look for those who are seeking. Colossians 4:3, Paul asks that doors be opened so that he can speak boldly. So we have to sit down and identify. If I was to walk down on Main Street here in Denison, and I was selling Carl's pen, I lost it. If I was selling Carl's pen, and I just walk up to everybody I met and said, are you wanting to buy a pen today? How many people would say, yeah, I want to buy a pen? I might run into one and say, I was down here looking for a pen. Well, here you go. But 99 would say, sorry,
I've got plenty.
I've got plenty. Don't need one. You know. But if I use my intellect a little bit, think about it a little bit, I can identify, hey, I know Carl's always needing a pen. I'm going to go talk to him. Debbie's always needing a pen. I'm going to go talk to her. You know? I heard Wendy talk about a pen one day. I'm going to go talk to her. We just have to use our skill and our intellect a little bit to get that done. And then we have to take action. Continually soul conscious. You know, we love people. People that are close to us, our friends, our family, people we care about, that should be the people we're exposing to the gospel. That's who we go to first. And we try to do that through effective communication. See, Paul said that I can speak boldly. We know how to speak. So choose 2 or 3 from among your friends, maybe a couple of families, that you say, I'm going to focus on them. This is what I'm going to put effort into. Intentionally. I'm going to try to set up a personal Bible study. I'm going to try to present the gospel. I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to talk to them. You know, I was talking earlier about sometimes you just from little subtle hints and things, you pick up who people, what they're thinking or what they're... I've been on this grand jury for nearly 15 months. Got 3 more to go. And I've been sitting next to this guy for those 15 months. And we talk about the weather, and he's from a little town up in central Oklahoma, and we talk about his town versus my town. We talked about football team. We talked about everything for 15 months. The other day he said something about his house. He said, well, it's not a big house, it's a preacher's house. I live in the preacher's house. Now, being a good Church of Christ person, I said, preacher's house, that's, you know, we don't, everybody else says parsonage, but we say the preacher's house. So after we got off out of that, we were walking to our cars that night, and I go, I heard you say a preacher's house. Where do you preach at, you know? He goes, oh, I'm the Church of Christ preacher in Conway, Oklahoma. I said, how long you been there? 42 years. It's quite a fellow. See? But just that little clue, a preacher's house, I learned who this guy was. Well, that's what we have to do with other folks. Those little clues tell us. And so once we do that, we can add them to we start to develop a friendship. You know, we went to lunch together the next day, so now we're buddies. And he owes me lunch, by the way. And so we get to know each other. And so that's the way we become friends. Well, we have these friends that you've developed over the years, and then you get new friends by doing what we were just talking about, and then you need to focus on them. You know, make a commitment to pray every day for the people you've chosen. The people, the short list you have. Pray every day that you have the opportunity to teach them more. Think each day how you can improve that relationship. You know, I talked about Pavlov. Well, we keep giving them something good. Make it better. Let your friends see your commitment. Don't be ashamed of that. Look for the appropriate time to teach them, the appropriate time to invite them. But do it. You got to get started. You got to take that first step. Share your own spiritual story. We all need Jesus. We all need salvation. We've all failed. You know, you're no different than I am. I'm no different than you are when it comes to that. And one guy said, always try to leave something in their hands. Something physical. Maybe it's a tract. You know, maybe it's a piece of paper with a Bible verse on it. Whatever. Gives you the next opportunity to talk. And encourage your friends to make decisions to become a Christian. Next question for your notebook. What type of attitude should you exhibit in a Bible study? What kind of attitude should you have if you're going to study with someone about the New Testament? About what God has told us to do? And you have the wrong attitude? I know you don't. I understand it, you don't. You be quiet and I'll tell you what you need to know. I've known people do that. You're wrong, I'm right. We talked about gauging interest earlier, about openness, but try to gauge interest in whether someone will come to services with you. Encourage people. We talked about bringing. Bringing is important. Have that plan in mind. Be honest what you're inviting them to do. Make sure they understand what they're getting into. And it shouldn't be a surprise when they come to our worship service. A lot of websites, a lot of good websites, and I don't remember if it's on yours, but they put right there on the website, they'll have a page, what to expect when you visit our services. And it talks about a cappella singing, talks about giving is not necessary for the visitor, you know, talks about communion, said you'll hear a sermon. So it just tells them what they expect. And I think that's excellent, because people get uncomfortable when they don't know what they're walking into. Make sure they understand when you say, I'm inviting you to study the Bible. Hey, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to sit down. You're going to open your Bible, I'm going to open my Bible, and we're going to talk about things. Make sure they understand that they feel comfortable with that. And put the responsibility for communication on yourself. You should be the one who invites. You should be the one who tries to set up the meeting, the time, all those kinds of things. You're the one who's doing that. And avoid those words that we talked about earlier that they don't understand. Well, you really need to be sanctified. And until you're sanctified, you cannot go to heaven. And they're going, what? And so communicate your desires and expected experience. Hey, I'm hoping that after we get through with this, that as we go through this, you're going to decide to become a Christian. Is there anything wrong with telling them that up front? Setting that expectation? You know, I'm hoping, I'm wishing, I'm praying that as we go through this study, eventually you're going to become a Christian. And be respectful and friendly. I've seen people that turn people off just with their attitude and with the way they talk to people. They talk down to people. They don't show respect for people. And avoid them putting them on the spot in gift trips if you can. Somewhere along the line, people have to be guilty of sin. But somewhere along the line, we may have to put them on the spot. Are you going to become a Christian or not? But there's, again, timing is what's important. And even use formal invitations if the situation allows. Hey, here's for the time we meet. We sure would like to have you here. So then after we have this effort with them, this evangelism effort with them, and we get them to where they've decided to become a Christian, they're baptized into Christ. As Chris was talking about earlier this morning, we have to follow up. We have to stay with them. New Christians are most vulnerable. You know, sometimes we just let them drift back to the world, back into who cares. So we need to constantly reassure them about salvation. We need to constantly pray for them. We need to constantly be checking up on them, encouraging them, especially about meeting. You know, once we see a pattern of missing a service or two, get involved, see why, bring them back, continually study with them, those kinds of things. Remember we talked earlier about why people drop out and when they drop out. So we need to make sure we're following up. You know, I've always regretted that young man we baptized that Sunday afternoon, we didn't get his contact information. That was a mistake. Well, first of all, I thought he was going to come back, but then he said he might not, and he didn't, and I didn't have any way of contacting him. So, can we opt out of evangelism? No. Can we have other priorities? Well, we can, but we shouldn't. Are we willing to follow through on our commitment to work for Christ? See, we are the chance for people to contact the gospel. You are the chance for people to contact the gospel. you're the only one sometimes that they're going to have that opportunity with. So as we conclude today, you're going to get out of here early. How about that? Allow yourselves to be used. Have the attitude of a servant. This is not about me. This is about what I can do for you. Change the focus when it's necessary, not the message. Put the focus on whatever it needs to be to get the message through. But put it back on serving others. That we are obedient to that command to go into all the world. That we realize God's ways are best. What worked will work, will continue to work. God tells us what to do. That we develop an enthusiasm for presenting the gospel. We have some excitement about it. That we teach what is not understood. That's the things we need to do. We sing the song, rescue the perishing, care for the dying, right? So we need to open our eyes and say, we've got a life and death emergency in front of us. People are dying without Christ. People are dying right in front of us without Christ, without ever hearing Him, without ever having the opportunity to hear Him. And as inadequate as we may feel, still God places on us the responsibility to spread the good news. He puts us in other people's lives so that we can tell them about Christ. We're there to help them reach heaven, and they may not reach it without us. So that's what we have to do when it comes to evangelism. Philip opened his mouth and beginning at this scripture, preached Jesus unto him. It's not any more complicated than that. Opened his mouth, spoke of the scriptures, and he preached Jesus. That's it. You know, there is no substitute for diligence. There is no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for loving people. There's no substitute for presenting the Bible and the simple message of Christ and the gospel. There's no substitute for us to repent of our past negligence and turn it around and start moving forward when it comes to evangelism. And there's no substitute for praying to God for His help. You know, He says, I'll give you the increase. The increase is what He gives to us. So, I appreciate yesterday, last night, and today. We'll have 3 lessons tomorrow that are connected to this. Our Bible class, we're going to talk about how we become lights in the world. The morning worship service, we're going to talk about how no matter our size, we can do great things. And then for the devotional after lunch, and I can tell you folks, if you're visiting today, you might want to come tomorrow because the people here have a great lunch. We're going to finish up with how we gain confidence by being steadfast. So I hope you're here if you can be tomorrow. And again, I appreciate you being here for the last night and today. I think we're going to end with a prayer, and y'all told me who, and I forgot.